concept of the fairy dance as a bad omen is a well-known theme in Celtic folklore, particularly in Irish and Scottish traditions. It often carries dark connotations, with the belief that joining or even witnessing a fairy dance could lead to serious consequences, including death. This idea is closely related to the Dance of Death or the Danse Macabre. The Dance of Death comes from Middle Ages art and poetry, and consisted of the dead with the Grim Reaper summoning representatives from all walks of life to dance along to the grave, typically with a pope, emperor, king, child and labourer. The art portrayed was that of dark gallows humour. It is linked to the Black Death through plague art. Plague art from the time of the Black Death contained gruesome imagery that was directly influenced by the mortality of the plague and by the medieval fascination with the macabre and awareness of death. The sheer amount of death and disease those societies witnessed during the plague on a daily basis had a profound impact on their culture and art. Although overshadowed by the Irish famine of the 19th century in modern Irish culture, the Black Death had a profound impact on Ireland during the 14th century. Historians estimate that the Black Death caused significant mortality, with fatalities ranging from a quarter to a third of the population. This devastating impact mirrored the widespread devastations seen across Europe during the pandemic, so it seems likely that the themes of the Danse Macabre seeped into Celtic mythology. According to Celtic folklore, stumbling upon a fairy dance could be extremely dangerous. It was believed that if a person joined the fairies in their dance, they would be enchanted and could dance until they died of exhaustion or were spirited away to the fairy realm, never to return. In some stories, time moves differently in the fairy world, so what feels like a short dance could result in years or even centuries passing in the human world. Those who were lured into a fairy dance and managed to escape were often left physically or mentally altered. In many stories, these individuals either wasted away shortly after their return or were never quite the same again, as if part of their soul had been taken by the fairies. In extreme cases, the victim would die soon after their experience. Some of these stories from Irish oral tradition were recorded in a book by Lady Wilde published in 1887 called Ancient Legends, Mystic Charms and Superstitions of Ireland. So let us begin.
The story of the death sign. A woman was out one day looking after her sheep in the valley, and coming by a little stream she sat down to rest, when suddenly she seemed to hear the sound of low music, and turning round she beheld at some distance a crowd of people dancing and making merry. And she grew afraid and turned her head away not to see them. Then close by her stood a young man, pale and strange-looking, and she beheld him with fear. "Who are you?" she said at last, "and why do you stand beside me?" "You ought to know me," he replied, "for I belong to this place. But make haste now and come away, or evil will befall you." Then she stood up and was going away with him, when the crowd left off their dancing and ran towards them, crying, "Come back, come back, come back!" "Don't stop, don't listen," said the young man, "but follow me." Then they both began to run, and ran on until they reached a hillock. "Now we are safe," said he. "They can't harm us here." And when they stopped, he said to her again, "Look me in the face and say, if you know me now." "No," she answered, "you are a stranger to me." "Look again," he said. "Look me straight in the face and you will know me." Then she looked, and knew instantly that he was a man who had been drowned the year before in the dark winter time, and the waves had never cast up his body on the shore. And she threw up her arms and cried aloud, "Have you news of my child? Have you seen her, my fair-haired girl, that was stolen from me this day 7 years? Will she come back to me never no more?" "I have seen her," said the man, "but she will never come back, never more, for she has eaten of the fairy food, and must now stay with the spirits under the sea, for she belongs to them body and soul. But go home now, for it is late, and evil is near you, and perhaps you will meet her sooner than you think." Then, as the woman turned her face homeward, the man disappeared, and she saw him no more. When at last she reached the threshold of her house, a fear and trembling came on her, and she called to her husband that someone stood in the doorway, and she could not pass. And with that she fell down on the threshold on her face, but spake no word more, and when they lifted her up she was dead.
The story contains a number of beliefs of fairy abduction, where humans who eat fairy food are forever bound to the fairy realm, and the idea that the dead or those connected to the fairy world can bring ominous news. The tragic ending, where the woman dies at her own doorstep, shows the deadly consequences of encountering the supernatural. The tale reflects the deep-seated fears in Irish folklore about the fairy world, which is often portrayed as alluring but dangerous, capable of stealing loved ones away and causing untimely deaths. The story also touches on the theme of loss and the desperate hope for the return of those who have vanished, only to be met with the harsh reality that they are lost forever to the other world.
The story of November Eve. It is esteemed a very wrong thing amongst the islanders to be about on November Eve, minding any business, for the fairies have their flitting then, and do not like to be seen or watched, and all the spirits come to meet them and help them. But mortal people should keep at home, or they will suffer for it, for the souls of the dead have power over all things on that one night of the year. And they hold a festival with the fairies, and drink red wine from the fairy cups, and dance to fairy music till the moon goes down. There was a man of the village who stayed out late one November Eve fishing, and never thought of the fairies until he saw a great number of dancing lights, and a crowd of people hurrying past with baskets and bags, and all laughing and singing and making merry as they went along. "You are a merry set," he said. "Where are you all going to?" "We are going to the fair," said a little old man with a cocked hat and a gold band round it. "Come with us, Hugh King, and you will have the finest food and the finest drink you ever set eyes upon. And just carry this basket for me," said a little red-haired woman. So Hugh took it and went with them till they came to the fair, which was filled with a crowd of people he had never seen on the island in all his days. And they danced and laughed and drank red wine from little cups. And there were pipers and harpers and little cobblers mending shoes, and all the most beautiful things in the world to eat and drink, just as if they were in a king's palace. But the basket was very heavy, and Hugh longed to drop it, that he might go and dance with a little beauty with long yellow hair that was laughing up close to his face. "Well, here, put down the basket," said the red-haired woman, "for you are quite tired, I see." And she took it and opened the cover, and out came a little old man, the ugliest, most misshapen little imp that could be imagined. "Ah, thank you, Hugh," said the imp quite politely. "You have carried me nicely, for I am weak on the limbs. Indeed, I have nothing to speak of in the way of legs, but I'll pay you well, my fine fellow. Hold out your 2 hands." And the little imp poured down gold and gold and gold into them, bright golden guineas. "Now go," said he, "and drink my health, and make yourself quite pleasant, and don't be afraid of anything you see and hear." So they all left him except the man with the cocked hat, and the red sash round his waist. "Wait here now a bit," says he, "for Finvara, the king is coming, and his wife, to see the fair." As he spoke, the sound of a horn was heard, and up drove a coach and 4 white horses, and out of it stepped a grand, grave gentleman all in black, and a beautiful lady with a silver veil over her face. "Here is Finvara himself and the queen," said the little old man. But Hugh was ready to die of fright when Finvara asked, "What brought this man here?" And the king frowned and looked so black that Hugh nearly fell to the ground with fear. Then they all laughed, and laughed so loud that everything seemed shaking and tumbling down from the laughter. And the dancers came up, and they all danced round Hugh and tried to take his hands to make him dance with them. "Do you know who these people are and the men and women who are dancing round you?" asked the old man. "Look well. Have you ever seen them before?" And when Hugh looked, he saw a girl that had died the year before, then another and another of his friends that he knew had died long ago, and then he saw that all the dancers, men, women and girls, were the dead in their long white shrouds. And he tried to escape from them but could not, for they coiled round him and danced and laughed and seized his arms and tried to draw him into the dance, and their laugh seemed to pierce through his brain and kill him. And he fell down before them there, like one faint from sleep, and knew no more till he found himself next morning lying within the old stone circle by the fairy rath on the hill. Still it was all true that he had been with the fairies. No one could deny it, for his arms were all black with the touch of the hands of the dead. The time they had tried to draw him into the dance, but not one bit of all the red gold which the little imp had given him could he find in his pocket. Not one single golden piece, it was all gone for evermore. And Hugh went sadly to his home, for now he knew that the spirits had mocked him and punished him, because he troubled their revels on November Eve, that one night of all the year when the dead can leave their graves and dance in the moonlight on the hill, and mortals should stay at home and never dare to look on them.
This tale illustrates the belief in Irish folklore that certain nights, especially November Eve, the night before Samhain, are when the boundaries between the living and the dead are thin. On these nights the dead and the fairies come together to revel. Mortals who cross paths with them on this night risk being drawn into their otherworldly realm. It also reveals the deceptive nature of fairy gifts, as the gold Hugh receives turns out to be illusory, reflecting the common belief that fairy rewards often vanish or transform into something worthless.
The story of the Dance of the Dead. It is especially dangerous to be out late on the last night of November, for it is the closing scene of the revels, the last night when the dead have leave to dance on the hill with the fairies, and after that they must all go back to their graves and lie in the chill, cold earth without music or wine till the next November comes round, when they all spring up again in their shrouds and rush out into the moonlight with mad laughter. One November night, a woman of Shark Island, coming home late at the hour of the dead, grew tired and sat down to rest, when presently a young man came up and talked to her. "Wait a bit," he said, "and you will see the most beautiful dancing you ever looked on there by the side of the hill." And she looked at him steadily. He was very pale and seemed sad. "Why are you so sad?" she asked, "and as pale as if you were dead?" "Look well at me," he answered. "Do you not know me?" "Yes, I know you now," she said. "You are young Brian that was drowned last year when out fishing. What are you here for?" "Look," he said, "at the side of the hill, and you will see why I am here." And she looked and saw a great company dancing to sweet music, and amongst them were all the dead who had died as long as she could remember, men, women and children, all in white, and their faces were pale as the moonlight. "Now," said the young man, "run for your life, for if once the fairies bring you into the dance, you will never be able to leave them any more." But while they were talking, the fairies came up and danced round her in a circle, joining their hands. And she fell to the ground in a faint, and knew no more till she woke up in the morning in her own bed at home. And they all saw that her face was pale as the dead, and they knew that she had got the fairy stroke. So the herb doctor was sent for, and every measure tried to save her, but without avail, for just as the moon rose that night, soft, low music was heard round the house, and when they looked at the woman, she was dead.
Just as in the dance of death, where no one can escape their end, those who are caught up in the fairy dance cannot escape their fate, be it death or being lost to the fairy world. The dance represents the fine line between life and death, where the joyous celebration of the fairies can quickly turn into a deadly trap for humans. The fairy dance in Celtic folklore is a powerful symbol of the dangers of the supernatural. To be caught up in the dance is to risk losing yourself entirely, whether through death, madness, or disappearance. The parallels with the Dance of the Dead underscore the idea that certain encounters with the otherworld are not just risky but can lead directly to one's demise.